Kneecap are an Irish hip-hop group whose success should not make any sense whatsoever. They rap in the Irish language, which has only 78,000 native speakers, and yet somehow they have performed shows all over the world, appeared on Jimmy Fallon, and have been praised by Elton John. However, when you look at the fascinating story behind Kneecap and how both Irish culture and global culture are changing, you can see why they have been so successful and the potentially good news this could be for the Irish language. All three members of Kneecap are examples of the different ways in which Irish people learn the Irish language. Mowgli Bop grew up speaking Irish at home. Mo Chiara and DJ Provy learned Irish through education. When they decided to start a rap group, DJ Provy was actually working as an Irish teacher at a local school, so he needed to conceal his identity. And funnily enough, he continues to wear this mask today, even though he has since been forced to resign from teaching when he was eventually found out. Belfast, as most people watching will know, has, very generally speaking, consisted of two different communities. The nationalist community, who view themselves as Irish, and the unionist community, who consider themselves to be British, and many others who fall in between. When Kneecap were starting out as a group in 2017, many nationalists wanted to introduce the Irish Language Act. This was legislation that would make Irish an officially recognised language alongside English in Northern Ireland. However, many people in the unionist community opposed this legislation and felt that this would be imposing the Irish language on non-Irish speakers. The Irish language was also seen as something political and more than simply a language people happen to speak. And it was this opposition that inspired Kneecap's breakthrough song, Cearta. On the night before a protest for the Irish Language Act, Mowgli Bop spray painted the word Cearta and his Irish for rights onto a wall. And later that night, his friend was arrested and refused to speak to the police in English, which resulted in him spending the night in jail. The song Cearta talks about being young and living in Belfast, as well as being mistreated by the police, and is rapped entirely in Irish. While you would like to think that the Irish-speaking community would be over the moon that a popular hip-hop song was made in their language, Kneecap immediately drew criticism. In fact, it was this song that landed the group with their first of many controversies. One of the biggest things the Irish government has done to promote the Irish language is Radio na Gaeltacht, which is a radio station spoken completely in Irish. This station was due to play the song Cearta, but decided to completely pull it from their afternoon playlists. The station felt that the song had too much profanity and just wasn't suitable for its audience. Another public radio station, 2FM, also decided not to play Cearta because it had some negative comments about the police force, which Kneecap have defended and said were satirical. And this very incident taps into a common perception of the Irish language and how it has been heavily romanticised. The most popular Irish language musician is Enya and her former band, Canad, who drew upon themes of nature, spirituality and olden times, whereas Kneecap were speaking about modern life in a big city. In fact, many of the drug references in Cearta are in English because there are simply no Irish words given to them. Speaking about this controversy, Mowgli Bop said, "We want people to know that Irish speakers aren't just the one thing. We are a diverse people, and this is our attempt at highlighting that. We know that some people may not like what we're doing, and that some people view the Irish language as pure, but it's all a bit of fun." In response to this ban, a petition was started to reinstate the song on the airwaves and received over 700 signatures. So, ironically, this decision not to play Kneecap's music had the opposite effect and only made people want to check out their music even more. But given that a lot of the mainstream media in Ireland didn't want anything to do with Kneecap, instead they built a steady underground following of fans in Ireland, and particularly in Belfast. While the song Cearta contains lyrics in Irish, Kneecap's music contains a mixture of both English and Irish, and this reflects the lives of many Irish speakers today, where they converse in both languages interchangeably. As the group continued to do gigs across Ireland and further afield, it was during one fateful concert in 2019 that their success would be taken to a completely new level. That year, the English director Rich Pepiot had just moved from London to Belfast with his Irish wife and was drinking at a pub where he saw a poster for a Kneecap concert in the city. Having sparked his curiosity, Pepiot decided to go to the gig and left feeling both inspired but also somewhat confused. Speaking about this incident, he said, "There were probably about 800 people in there. I knew Kneecap were rapping in Irish, which was interesting, but what was more surprising was that 800 people were rapping back in Irish. I just didn't realise there were that many young people in Belfast who understood Irish. I thought it was a language confined to the countryside and old people. As a filmmaker, I thought, if I don't know this, there must be millions who don't either. It was the start of something interesting, the foundation of what potentially could be a story. For Pepe, Kneecap's success made no sense whatsoever. But there are certain things that have changed in society that have made their success much more achievable. Kneecap were not played in the radio, but getting your song played in the radio is much less relevant than it was in recent decades. Instead, Kneecap were able to grow organically online and through live gigs. Alongside this trend, there is a growing interest in music outside of the English language. You can see this particularly in Spanish-speaking reggaeton music and K-pop, where a song does not have to be in English to appear in the charts. And even people who don't understand the language are happy to look up the definition of words online. So the internet has definitely removed some of the barriers that non-English speaking artists had decades ago, and this has allowed Kneecap to grow among Irish speakers and people learning Irish, but also people who don't know a single word of the language either. Pepe started emailing Kneecap, but they ignored him for several months. As musicians, they regularly got filmmakers looking to do documentaries on them and promising big things. However, he eventually managed to convince them to meet up for pints and proposed a semi-fictional biopic about the group, which was eventually agreed upon. As Kneecap continued to grow, so too did some of their controversies. However, as Pepe argues, some of these controversies have often come from simple misunderstandings. In fact, Kneecap's decision to work with Pepe goes against one of the main criticisms they get from the media. The group are often criticised for being anti-British, but Kneecap has hit back at this by saying that a lot of their comments were intended to be funny and satirical. Ultimately, their humour is directed at the British establishment and not ordinary British people themselves. According to Pepe, Kneecap themselves would always point out they don't hate British people, they hate the British state and what that stands for. Certainly, if they hated British people, they wouldn't spend 5 years working with me. At one point they did say I was the only English person they liked, but that was quite a few years ago, and I think they've expanded that list now. Kneecap has also been criticised for being insensitive about the Troubles. All of them were born in the 1990s, when the conflict in Northern Ireland was coming to a close. And they are part of a new generation who have used humour when dealing with what happened in the past, but for the people of an older generation, these jokes perhaps don't land as well. In fact, the name Kneecap comes from a brutal form of punishment during the Troubles, so their humour is not to everyone's taste. The one thing you can't really criticise Kneecap about is their impact on the Irish language. With the movie, Kneecap have now helped revitalise the Irish language on two fronts, in music and in cinema. Just like in music, many Irish language movies often have a nostalgic and rural tone, so Pepe was inspired to make a gritty urban drama in the same vein as the movie Trainspotting. And just like in music, the use of the English language is not as important as it used to be in cinema and TV, with Korean stories such as Parasite and Squid Game doing phenomenally well. And in the Irish language, and Callan Kuhn, or The Quiet Girl, was nominated for an Oscar in 2022. Speaking about Irish language films, Pepe said, "They're always set in the past, it's always the potato famine. We thought, wouldn't it be cool to make a film for Irish speakers that was modern and gritty and blackly comic? Sex and drugs." Pepe wrote the script in consultation with Kneecap, and after 6 months of acting lessons, they finally started working on the movie. When asked about what impact the film might have, Mowgli Bap said, "I think it's hopefully going to open doors for more films. Obviously, we had on Callan Kuhn, which was nominated for an Oscar, and I think this, in a way, will open doors that people will imagine the Irish language in other realms all around the world. And, like any other language, it should be on the world stage. Most of all, we want to make the Irish language appeal to younger people, especially up north, the people on both sides of the community. And it's their language, our language, everyone's language. It doesn't matter where you're from, you can have the crack with it. You don't have to be so serious about it, have a bit of crack, have a bit of fun." And in 2024, the movie Kneecap made history by becoming the first Irish language movie to be screened at the prestigious Sundance Film Festival. While the number of Irish speakers is pretty low at the moment, these new breakthroughs at least prove that you don't necessarily need English for success in the arts and entertainment. Another important development is that in 2022, the Irish Language Act that Kneecap advocated for was finally enacted into legislation. While the Irish language is often negatively perceived as a dying language, this does not mean that it's going to continue to decline. The Hebrew language was once on the brink of dying out, and began its revival in the 19th century. Across the Irish Sea, the Welsh language has a relatively similar history as Irish, but is now at a level where 1 in 5 people can speak it. The fact that 1.1 million people are learning Irish on Duolingo is at least an indication that there is huge demand to learn the language. Above all, Kneecap hope that their work inspires people not only to learn the Irish language, but for people around the world to look into their own indigenous languages too. According to DJ Provy, when I was in the school, I really enjoyed it, and teaching Irish to people was something I was very passionate about. And a lot of people I taught went on to become teachers as well, which is brilliant for me. Now, I can see that there's a lot more people being reached, and not just people in Ireland, but outside of Ireland as well. And a lot of people are looking introspectively now at their own cultures, their own language, starting to question their identity and digging into who they are and where they come from. This is normally the part where I ask you to like and subscribe to the channel, but in the spirit of learning the Irish language, go raibh míle mágat as fihint ar an fisiensho agus torduin like agus listal hun taku leis an canal ledahel.